story of a chubby boy whose love confession is rejected by a wealthy young lady, and she insults him by calling him Piggy. So he is determined to become handsome, and devises a plan for revenge against that wealthy young lady. His name is Makabe, and he spends every day admiring himself in the mirror because he is so handsome, reveling in his perfect physique. Even his little sister gets tired of her narcissistic older brother. He doesn't even bother snacking to save a single calorie. Loli Mom prepares a whole table of food for Makabe in the morning. But in his eyes, it's all just grease and excess calories. So he rushes to school. Turns out, today is Makabe's first day at his new school. His sole criterion is that being handsome means having it all. And if you're not good looking, you're considered worthless. As soon as he steps into the school, he immediately captures the hearts of many girls. While other guys would get in trouble for sneakily looking at girls' underwear, Makabe, because of his good looks, makes girls feel like they want to proudly show off everything to him. Suddenly, Makabe notices a large group of students gathered together. It turns out that these guys are trying to confess their feelings to the school's beauty queen. She's famous as the Ice Princess, and the guy begins to drop hints, reciting poems and bragging about how wealthy his family is. To his surprise, the Ice Princess publicly announces a list of bad deeds he has done. This immediately makes everyone look down on him and keep their distance. In the end, the Ice Princess gives the guy a foolish nickname, which makes even Makabe fear this Ice Princess. At this moment, Makabe recalls his chubby past, and as he snaps back to reality, he realizes that he has dozed off in class, completely shattering his image as a handsome god. Suddenly, the class president, Futaba, comes over to befriend him, and Kojiro, his new friend, also brings Makabe a sandwich. Makabe realizes that if he eats this sandwich, he'll have to do 100 push-ups to compensate. Both of them admire Makabe for being both handsome and academically talented. Suddenly, the Ice Princess appears and grabs Makabe's collar. It turns out she's looking for the guy who wrote the love letter to her. It turns out to be the guy with glasses, so she doesn't hesitate to give him the nickname, Clumsy Prince, and tears up the love letter right in front of him. After she leaves, Kojiro tells Makabe that the Ice Princess is famous for hating boys named Aki. Upon hearing the name Aki, Makabe is shocked, realizing that Aki is the target of his revenge when he transferred to this school. So, Makabe begins to plan to keep an eye on Aki. Kojiro informs Makabe that Aki usually sends his servant, Yoshino, to buy lunch and eats alone. So, he begins to closely monitor Aki to see if she has any secrets. Makabe searches all over and eventually discovers both of them in a warehouse. Just as he was about to investigate further, he gets frightened by a spider, and that's when Aki discovers him. So, Makabe pretends as if he had just gone to the wrong place. Suddenly, he notices that Aki is eating a lot, and it turns out to be her secret. Makabe realizes he has identified Aki's weakness, so he decides to leave. But Aki also starts paying attention to him, and Makabe keeps trying to approach Aki but continually gets rejected by her. In the afternoon, while Aki is waiting for Yoshiro to buy food, she encounters the guy with glasses whom she had humiliated earlier in the morning. Suddenly, he grabs Aki's hair and intends to cut it. Fortunately, Makabe arrives in time to play the hero and save the beauty. Despite the pain, he tries to appear fine in front of Aki. This causes Aki to be moved by him, and at this moment, Makabe remembers his own past. It turns out that when he was young, he was overweight and often bullied in front of Aki's house. Unexpectedly, Aki came out and chased those kids away to help him. He thought Aki was a good girl, but one day, she rejected his confession and insulted him by calling him Piggy. So, this time, Makabe returns with the determination to make Aki fall for him and then reject her as his revenge plan. The next morning, everyone is surprised to see Makabe's injured hand, but he simply explains it away as an accident due to his carelessness. Suddenly, Makabe discovers a letter in his locker, thinking it's just a regular love letter. Surprisingly, the letter refers to him as Piggy, which triggers him as he realizes someone knows about his past. When he enters the classroom, Makabe is trying to figure out who knows his secret because he has kept this past hidden from everyone. And if people were to find out, it would shatter his image as a handsome god. It turns out that since being rejected by Aki, he has been training rigorously with his grandfather. Suddenly, he accidentally sees Yoshino buying pastries for Aki, causing her to stumble in front of Makabe. She then asks Makabe to help her buy bread. When Yoshino is about to leave, Makabe asks if the food is for Aki, and he also offers to help Yoshino deliver the food to Aki. Consider it as a way to repay the favor for Makabe buying food to help Yoshino. It turns out he is trying to verify if Aki has indeed discovered his secret. At this moment, Makabe finds Yoshino much more endearing than the Ice Princess Aki. So, Makabe has arrived at Aki's location. At this point, he begins to approach to verify if Aki is indeed the one who wrote the letter. So, he flirts with Aki and immediately leaves, leaving her blushing. It turns out that Makabe has learned how to flirt from romance manga. In the afternoon, when Makabe is happily heading home, he falls into a trap. At this moment, he realizes that the person who wrote the letter calling him Piggy is actually Yoshino. This surprises Makabe and makes him recall that Yoshino was also in the mansion in the photo, causing frustration as he believes his plan has been exposed. Suddenly, Yoshino says, "I will help you get revenge on Aki." The next morning, even though he doesn't understand Yoshino's intentions, Makabe continues with his plan for revenge against Aki on his own. His current goal is to obtain Aki's contact information. Suddenly, Futaba arrives and asks for Makabe's help in carrying a stack of documents. So, Makabe decides to try asking for her number. But he has never had experience asking for a girl's number before, so he ends up running away instead. While he's cleaning, Futaba finds Makabe, and suddenly she expresses her desire to go see a movie with him. Makabe realizes that Futaba is interested in dating him. However, Makabe declines because his current focus is solely on Aki. This makes Futaba feel sad, and she leaves. Meanwhile, Makabe indulges in the fact that a girl confessed her feelings to him. Suddenly, Aki appears behind him, so Makabe takes the opportunity to ask Aki out on a date. Surprising, she readily agrees. He didn't expect it to be so easy, but by the afternoon, Makabe is still waiting, and Aki hasn't shown up. Suddenly, he receives a letter with instructions to go on a detective-like adventure. After a while of playing around with the chickens, he eventually finds Aki, but she has written a large piece of paper with the word, "reject," on it, which infuriates him, making him realize that Aki has been playing a prank on him. Suddenly, Yoshino comes to find Makabe, and she gives him Aki's phone number. The next morning, Futaba informs the entire class that anyone who scores low on this exam will have to attend supplementary classes for 1 month. But Kojiro is not worried at all, and everyone thinks he is very smart. However, because his grades have never been above average, Makabe decides to tutor Kojiro to help him pass this exam. Suddenly, he sees Aki is also there. As it turns out, she is also tutoring Yoshino. So, Aki doesn't miss the chance to tease Makabe for being pranked by her the other day. Makabe recalls Yoshino's promise to help him with his revenge plan, so he decides to compete with Aki to see who can get the highest score on the exam. If Makabe wins, Aki will be obligated to go on a date with him. But if he loses, Aki can write a derogatory nickname for him and spread it around the school. Not only that, Aki also adds the condition that he must buy her lunch until she's satisfied. So, both of them start competing in the exam. That night, Aki is very confident that she will win. However, Yoshino tells her that Makabe once achieved the highest score when he transferred schools, which surprises Aki. Yoshino even gives Aki a book with dating tips. Makabe tries to contact Yoshino for help, but she unexpectedly refuses because he had made his decision on his own. The next morning, when they bump into each other, they immediately quiz each other on the material. Makabe realizes that he can only rely on himself to win. So, he continues to work hard along with Kojiro, and finally, the exam day arrives. Thanks to Makabe's help, Kojiro manages to pass the morning exam. When Makabe goes to buy some drinks, he runs into Yoshino again. Suddenly, she gives him a carton of milk, which makes Makabe feel very puzzled, but he still drinks the milk. Unexpectedly, during the afternoon exam, Makabe starts experiencing stomach pain. So, Makabe quickly realizes that Yoshino had put something in the milk, making him unable to complete the test as he urgently needs to use the restroom. In the afternoon, Makabe angrily goes to find Aki, only to discover that she is sick with a fever and has requested leave for the day. Suddenly, he receives a text message from his little sister, saying that they both have stomachaches due to their mother's homemade lunch. Makabe thought that he was the only one being forced to attend extra classes. Surprisingly, Aki was also forced to attend extra classes just like him. The next day, Yoshino suddenly informed Makabe that Aki had agreed to go on a date with him, which surprised Makabe, even though he didn't understand what was going on. He dressed up handsomely in advance. Unexpectedly, when he arrived, he saw Aki wearing a princess dress. It turns out this was her first date, so she wanted to make it special. Makabe called Yoshino to ask for dating advice. So, both of them started going to the movies and dining together. but Aki's outfit was so quirky that it attracted a lot of attention from people around them. Therefore, Makabe took her shopping. Unexpectedly, he heard Aki's scream from the changing room. So Makabe rushed in, only to get punched and knocked out. When he came to, Makabe found himself lying across Aki's lap. But Aki was still being stubborn and declared the date over. As it turns out, all the plans for this date were arranged by Yoshino, and Makabe started to accept Yoshino as his master. The next day, Makabe continued his plan to pursue Aki. So, when he entered the classroom, he kept looking at her and even said some cheesy lines from romance manga, making Aki feel uncomfortable. After school, it started raining. So Makabe took the opportunity to offer his umbrella to Aki, while he himself ran home in the rain. He thought his plan would make Aki fall for him, but unexpectedly, Yoshino said it was too cheesy, so she told you to be cooler next time. That evening, Makabe went back to study manga and realized that the cool male protagonists were always favored by the female characters. So, the next morning, Makabe started acting cooler and more distant, no longer paying attention to Aki. While Aki was trying to return the umbrella to him, she was consistently ignored. He thought his plan had worked, but he was surprised when Aki also ignored him and left. Yoshino immediately signaled to Makabe that he needed to maintain his aura of coolness. So, he kept avoiding Aki, making her increasingly uncomfortable. Unexpectedly, in the afternoon, Aki couldn't stand it anymore and immediately looked for Makabe. He tried to find a way to escape, but Makabe was caught by Aki, who asked him, "What on earth are you doing?" At this moment, Aki asked why he had been avoiding her. Makabe realized that his plan had succeeded when he saw Aki's embarrassed expression. He felt awkward and didn't know how to explain, so he decided to find Yoshino for advice on the next steps of the plan. At this point, Makabe continuously pleaded with Yoshino for help. Yoshino advised him to write a letter, and as Makabe was about to place it in Aki's locker, Makabe was caught by her. Surprisingly, Aki coldly threw it into the trash and even scolded him before running away. Makabe was left baffled and didn't understand what had just happened. Yoshino then came and told him to let her handle it. However, Makabe started to feel that he had become too passive in his revenge plan. He realized that this was his plan for revenge, so he decided to take matters into his own hands. On the other hand, Aki skipped school and sat in the park. She had seen Makabe talking to Yoshino. Therefore, Aki thought that Makabe was trying to love both of them at the same time, making Aki furious. Yoshino suddenly came over to talk to her. Yoshino was still as caring as when they were kids, always there to comfort Aki. It turned out that Aki despised boys who lied because she had been abandoned when she was young. Suddenly, Yoshino brought up the chubby boy from their past and asked if Aki still liked him, which made Aki blush. Suddenly, Yoshino disappeared. At this point, Aki was constantly thinking about the chubby boy from before, and Makabe didn't know if she really liked him. Suddenly, a car rushed toward Aki. Luckily, Makabe arrived in time and pulled Aki back, and saying, "If anything happens to you, I'll be really upset." This made Aki start to have feelings for Makabe. Suddenly, another girl appeared and apologized to Aki for accidentally bumping into her. Unexpectedly, the girl, upon seeing Makabe, immediately ran up to him and hugged him, saying, "It's been so long since I've seen you." This left Makabe completely shocked and confused about what was happening. At this point, she kept holding Makabe's hand continuously, while he still didn't know who this girl was. Then, her servant arrived to inform them that they had to leave. Aki, in her anger, immediately left. The next day, Makabe bought a lot of cakes to apologize to Aki. Suddenly, Yoshino intervened and said that Aki had ordered Makabe not to approach her anymore. At this point, Makabe recounted everything to Yoshino. "Some girl suddenly ran up and hugged me, but I had no idea who she was." So, Yoshino believed Makabe and let him enter to see Aki. However, Makabe still thought that it was better not to see her, so he left the cakes in front of the warehouse door for Aki. The next day, Makabe kept thinking about the girl who had hugged him the day before, but he couldn't figure out who she was. Suddenly, the teacher announced that there was a new student transferring to their class. Makabe immediately recognized the girl from yesterday. Her name was Fujinomiya, and her arrival immediately piqued everyone's curiosity because she was exceptionally beautiful. Meanwhile, Makabe was trying to figure out who this girl was. He kept observing her but couldn't come up with any answers. Eventually, Makabe decided to approach Fujinomiya directly and ask her. Surprisingly, Fujinomiya had transferred here because of Makabe, which left everyone astonished. She explained that 3 years ago, during Christmas, While she was collecting donations in the winter, Makabe had given her a coat. Since then, she had been searching for Makabe, while he wondered how this could be possible because 3 years ago, he was still the chubby boy training on the mountain. So Makabe took Fujinomiya's hand and ran off to have a private conversation with her. However, she suddenly pretended to cough up blood, which worried him, but it turned out to be tomato sauce that Fujinomiya used to tease Makabe. At this point, Makabe finally asks, "Why did you lie?" But Fujinomiya still wanted to keep the secret and continue confessing her feelings to Makabe, despite Fujinomiya being beautiful and adorable. But Makabe still had to maintain his determination for revenge and said, "I already have someone." So he led Fujinomiya to meet with Aki. Unexpectedly, Fujinomiya went directly to talk to her. Makabe thought everything was getting very tense. But luckily, a gust of wind blew Fujinomiya's skirt. Makabe quickly noticed that she was a free-spirited person who wasn't wearing underwear. At this moment, Aki was still angry and walked away. So Makabe chased after her to explain. However, he accidentally punched the teacher in the face, resulting in both of them being punished to clean the swimming pool. Aki continued to be haughty and told Makabe not to get close to her, which made him uncomfortable. He retaliated by using the hose to spray water at her. In response, Aki decided to retaliate by attempting to splash Makabe with a bucket of water, but she accidentally slipped and fell into the pool. Makabe assumed that Aki couldn't swim and jumped into the pool to rescue her. However, to his surprise, the water level was only up to his armpits. Seeing Makabe's continuous concern for her, Aki said, "If you like me, then prove it," and unexpectedly, this haughty girl asked Makabe to prove his feelings by kissing her. At this point, Makabe was deluded, thinking that his plan was about to succeed, to make Aki like him and then reject Aki. But at this point, Aki told him to kiss her instead. Seeing Makabe hesitating, Aki was about to leave, but he immediately pulled her hand back. But this was his first kiss, and he didn't know how to kiss, so he imagined Aki as a piece of beef. Makabe was surprised when Aki punched him in the face. It turned out to be Aki's first kiss as well, so she was also embarrassed. Suddenly, the Futaba group arrived at the pool, and Makabe was rescued from the situation. While he was still thinking about the kiss with Aki, Fujinomiya appeared again, so she immediately made tea for Makabe to drink. At this moment, Makabe just realized that Fujinomiya was very concerned about health. Suddenly, he asked her what she liked about him. He thought that Fujinomiya probably wouldn't be able to answer because he had been asked this question by Aki before. Surprisingly, she answered, "Because you're so modest that you don't even realize your own charm." And he didn't know what to say. She also advised, "You should be a little more confident, and you'll stand out even more," which helped Makabe regain his confidence. Meanwhile, Yoshino was observing the panty-less girl because she seemed very mysterious. Unexpectedly, as she was following them to Makabe's house, she was discovered by Makabe's butler and Fujinomiya. Although she pretended to be innocent, Fujinomiya saw through her trick, so Yoshino had to change her attitude and asks, "Why are you interested in Makabe?" Just when things were getting tense, Makabe's lowly mother arrived and recognized both of them as Makabe's friends. She immediately invited them into the house to practice being her future daughters-in-law. Makabe, upon returning home, couldn't understand why these two girls were here, making him think it wasn't his house. However, when he saw his lowly mom, he clearly recognized that this was his own home, so he led Yoshino upstairs to ask what was happening. Meanwhile, Makabe took the opportunity to hide a childhood photo of himself, and Yoshino went off to exercise. Suddenly, Fujinomiya also ran into Makabe's room, so he promptly pulled her out. It turns out she had finished preparing the food. Makabe noticed that Fujinomiya was consuming a lot of medication during dinner, while Yoshino and his younger sister were enjoying their meal without any concerns. Afterward, they all went outside to set off fireworks together, and at this moment, Makabe found the panty-less girl quite cute. He realized that without the deep-seated grudge against Aki, he might have actually developed feelings for Fujinomiya. Finally, it was time for everyone to head home. Unexpectedly, Fujinomiya had taken the childhood photo from Makabe's room. The next morning, Aki suddenly came to find Makabe. It turned out that summer vacation was approaching, so he was planning to invite Aki to go out with him. Unexpectedly, Aki also made plans for the summer vacation on her private island and even invited Kojiro to go with her to tease Makabe. However, Kojiro wanted Makabe to join them and brought along their friends. So, Aki had to invite the whole group along. When they were on the boat, Yoshino told Makabe that she still hadn't found any information about Fujinomiya. Surprisingly, Yoshino wanted Makabe to quickly execute the plan for revenge against Aki during this vacation. Otherwise, she threatened to reveal everything to Aki. In the end, they all arrived at the villa. Aki's family secretary, named Uesaki, came out to greet them. Suddenly, she noticed that Aki was accompanied by a boy, which surprised her. So, Makabe took the opportunity to say that he was Aki's boyfriend, leaving everyone shocked. Uesaki was delighted because she believed that Aki no longer disliked boys, which made Aki feel embarrassed as she led Makabe into the house to talk. At this point, Makabe realized that his plan had succeeded, so Aki reluctantly agreed to pretend to be a couple during their island vacation. So the whole group went to the beach together. While at the beach, Fujinomiya kept sticking to Makabe, asking him to apply sunscreen for her, and even hugging him. This made Aki jealous, and she intervened, making Makabe think that even though they were pretending, it felt real. Aki then led Makabe to another place, while Uesaki was still observing them. However, it turned out that Aki just wanted Makabe to act as her servant and fetch food for her. So, he had to go home to get some food for Aki, and in the meantime, he asked Uesaki if there were any fun activities on the island. She suggested a daring game to test their courage, which Makabe found intriguing. However, it turned out that she wanted to sabotage Aki and Makabe's relationship because she had a grudge against boys, especially after being rejected by a boy in the past. She happened to meet Aki once when Aki was crying because the chubby boy had left her, and since then, she has always admired Aki as a famous girl who hates and rejects boys. So, she doesn't allow Makabe to change Aki. It turns out that Uesaki's dare challenge was to explore a haunted house. So, the group drew lots to determine who would enter the haunted house first. However, Makabe had secretly arranged everything to get closer to Aki and appear when she was scared, with the hope of winning her affection. Meanwhile, Uesaki wanted to disguise herself as a ghost to scare Makabe and make him lose face in front of Aki. Unexpectedly, she was frightened by Yoshino, who pretended to be a murderer. Accidentally, she bumped into Aki, which scared her. Uesaki, amidst the chaos, ran outside and fainted after hitting a utility pole. When Uesaki woke up, she saw Makabe carrying her. At this moment, Makabe also apologized for lying about dating Aki, making Uesaki feel that Makabe was very considerate. She began to have feelings for him as well. In the end, the island vacation came to an end. Although Makabe hadn't succeeded in winning Aki's heart yet, his behavior made Yoshino very pleased. After returning home, Makabe continued his workouts and took pride in his physique. Suddenly, he received a call from Aki, which surprised him greatly because Aki had never called him before. It turned out that he had forgotten a bag at Aki's house. Makabe then continued discussing his plan with Yoshino, as he needed to be cautious and ensure that Aki didn't find out that he was the chubby boy from the past. Suddenly, when Makabe returned home, he realized that his childhood photo was missing. So, he began to suspect that Fujinomiya might be the one who took it. The next day, Makabe went to visit Aki to retrieve his bag. However, he couldn't help but recall the times when he was rejected by Aki as a child and even chased away by a dog. Makabe's primary concern at this moment was not understanding why Fujinomiya had stolen his photo and what her intentions were. Unexpectedly, he made Aki angry, because he wasn't paying attention to talking to her, and Aki left in annoyance. Suddenly, Fujinomiya called him. So Makabe took this opportunity to meet Fujinomiya. She said she's currently home alone and invited him over. While Fujinomiya was making tea, Makabe found an excuse to use the bathroom and decided to investigate where his photo was. Unexpectedly, when he entered Fujinomiya's room, he found romance manga everywhere. Suddenly, she appeared behind him, so Makabe had to ask her directly if Fujinomiya had stolen his photo or not. Surprisingly, she admitted to taking it, and she complimented that Makabe was very cute when he was little, which made him feel touched. So, Fujinomiya kissed Makabe, causing his mind to start losing control. Suddenly, he remembered his grudge against Aki for abandoning him, which helped him regain control. Makabe disclosed his past of having been bullied because of his chubby appearance to Fujinomiya. So Makabe decided to leave because his current goal was to seek revenge against Aki. So Fujinomiya realized that she had been rejected. The next day, everyone had plans to go out together, but they noticed that Makabe seemed very exhausted. Everyone started to have fun and play together. Only Makabe felt guilty, because today, Fujinomiya was supposed to go out with the entire group. When they were preparing to go home, Fujinomiya's butler approached Makabe and told him that Fujinomiya was missing, and she was unwell without her medication. Makabe suddenly remembered that Fujinomiya had a fragile health condition, and he had left her without her medication. He had to tell everyone the truth, that he had rejected Fujinomiya the previous day to choose Aki. At this point, the most important thing is to find Fujinomiya. So the group starts searching together. Despite looking everywhere, they can't find Fujinomiya. In the end, they go back to the school. Unexpectedly, Makabe encounters Aki here. He thought that Aki really disliked Fujinomiya, but it turns out she also cares about Fujinomiya, and she said, "I understand what it feels like to be rejected." This angers Makabe because Aki had rejected him in the past in a similar way. So, he decides to tell the truth and asks, "Do you remember Piggy?" Suddenly, a paper airplane fell and hit Makabe on the head. Both of them realized that Fujinomiya was on the rooftop. Just like the scenes from the manga she had read, it turned out that Fujinomiya had also anticipated that Makabe would come there. At this point, she was exhausted, so they took her to the hospital. Fortunately, she recovered and wanted to have a private conversation with Makabe. It turns out that she had a severe medical condition, and her family decided to take her abroad for surgery. However, the success rate was very low, so Fujinomiya asked her grandfather to allow her to experience love once, saying that her choice of Makabe was purely coincidental because arranged marriages among wealthy families were common. This revelation shocked Makabe, and he started to suspect that his lowly mother might be behind this. At this point, she said she had no regrets, even though her love was unrequited. She decided that when she got better, she would go far away. While everyone was waiting outside, Makabe walked out, ignoring Aki and going straight home. Fujinomiya was looking at a childhood photo taken with Makabe. It turns out that she lied when she said she chose Makabe randomly, because both families have arranged for them to be together since they were young. Makabe, on the other hand, remained determined to carry out his plan, making Aki fall in love with him and then breaking her heart in the worst way. Aki, at this point, was still contemplating whether to accept Makabe's feelings. And she remembered the chubby boy, so he is the role model Aki loves. Suddenly, a chubby young man appeared, and Aki realized that the chubby boy from her past had returned. Meanwhile, Makabe was preparing to go to the mountains for more training to make his body even more well-toned. On Aki's side, Gasso had sent the engagement letter from his grandfather to Aki's household staff. So, Yoshino tried to contact Makabe, while he was still unaware of what was happening and focusing on self-improvement on the mountain. So the new school year has started. On Aki's side, her friends admired her for being the ice princess who seemed to despise boys. Suddenly, they noticed Aki being tender towards the chubby guy, which surprised the whole group and made them realize that her preference was for chubby boys. Meanwhile, Makabe was happily attending classes, but to his surprise, he saw Fujinomiya still at school. It turned out she had successfully undergone surgery and decided to return to school. She was surprised that over the summer break, there had been no progress between Makabe and Aki. In fact, she even saw Aki with another guy, but Makabe still wasn't worried, thinking that the chubby guy was not a rival for him. But he was surprised when he brought a cake for Aki and found that the chubby guy was quite close to her. The chubby guy even introduced himself as Gasso and shockingly said, "I'm engaged to Aki." It immediately shocked Makabe. He immediately took Yoshino outside to ask for more details. It turned out that Yoshino had been calling Makabe throughout the summer, but he didn't take his phone with him during training. She also mentioned that Aki's behavior was very strange, as if she was already in love with that chubby guy. This led Makabe to start following Aki and Gasso, and he realized that everything Yoshino had said was true, which made him very angry. He couldn't understand why Aki would choose that chubby guy. Aki's three fangirls were also disappointed, because Aki was no longer the ice princess she used to be. Suddenly, Gasso appeared and expressed his intention to have lunch with them, making the whole group uncomfortable. However, Gasso just wanted to talk to them. Unexpectedly, he revealed that he was engaged to Aki due to family pressure, so, all three girls sympathized with him, standing by his side. At that moment, Futaba announced that the school would organize a play based on the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. However, what concerned Makabe the most at this moment was that he needed to resolve the issue with the chubby guy next to Aki. He decided to find Aki and talk to her about it. While he was about to explain everything, she told him, "You forgot to zip your pants." So, she goes along with the chubby guy again, making Makabe feel very uncomfortable. While the three friends have sided with the chubby guy and want to deal with Makabe, because they think he's a pervert. In the midst of this, Makabe's Class A and Aki's Class B are competing for the role of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in a school play. Makabe challenges Gasso to see who can perform better and win the chance to dance with Aki at the upcoming dance party. So Gasso agreed as well. At this point, the whole group started practicing for the play. However, Futaba insisted that Kojiro should play Snow White, but he didn't want to pretend to be a girl, so he ran away. While Makabe was trying to find Kojiro and bring him back, he encountered the chubby guy who criticized Makabe's attempts to woo Aki as childish games. Makabe remained determined to win against this imposter chubby guy. As Gasso went home with Aki, he remembered the reason for his lie. It turned out that Gassu's family was facing difficulties, and he coincidentally met Uesaki, the secretary. She mistook Gasso for the chubby boy who used to play with Aki, so he decided to disguise himself as Makabe to change his fate. The next day, as the performance was about to begin, everyone saw Makabe appearing to be unwell, but he tried to pretend that he was fine. It turned out that the night before, to prove to his mother and little sister that he was healthy, Makabe had foolishly climbed onto the roof to enjoy the breeze. Realizing that he might lose to the chubby guy, Makabe decided to find a place to rest for a while. Suddenly, Fujinomiya rushed in, holding his hand and leading him to the medical room. It turned out that she had noticed Makabe was unwell, but both of them were unaware that someone was planning to kidnap him. When Fujinomiya and Kojiro returned after buying drinks, they couldn't find Makabe anywhere. He had been kidnapped and thrown into a warehouse. It turns out that the tomboy girl took advantage of the fact that Makabe was asleep and brought him here. While everyone was still trying to find Makabe because the play was about to begin, it turned out that the tomboy girl wanted to help Gasso and Aki dance together. Unexpectedly, on Aki's side, they discovered that Gasso was missing too. It turns out that Yoshino disguised herself as a witch to lure him into the storeroom to lock him up. On Makabe's side, he was trying to convince the tomboy girl to untie him. Suddenly, the girl with glasses contacted him and wanted to talk, telling him to release Gasso as a sign of reconciliation. Makabe realized that his master, Yoshino, was behind this, so he refused the girl with glasses, making her angry and wanting to hit Makabe. Aki realized there was no time left and decided to perform without a prince. Meanwhile, Makabe was trying to escape from the tomboy girl. However, she became furious and attacked Makabe, so he tricked her into jumping out of the window. The tomboy girl immediately jumped after him, so she ended up falling into the water. At this point, Makabe immediately ran to the location of Aki's performance. Realizing that she was performing without a prince, Makabe now understood that Aki's performance was exceptional. She had put a lot of effort into this role. The girl with glasses ran over to confront Makabe, thinking that he was the one who had captured Gasso to sabotage their performance. While Makabe was about to search for his master, Yoshino, to persuade her to release Gasso, he didn't expect that Yoshino was also on the stage. So Makabe decided to step in as the prince instead of Gasso. Aki thought her performance had ended, but suddenly, Makabe appeared, surprising everyone. Despite his exhaustion due to his illness, he made an effort to signal the seven dwarfs to coordinate with him. Fortunately, they understood and collaborated with him. However, Makabe unexpectedly fell on stage. After some effort, he managed to reach Aki's side. While Aki thought that a simple pretend kiss would do, she was surprised when Makabe kissed her for real, leaving the whole stage in shock. Even though she punched Makabe hard, causing him to faint, the performance was still a success. Gasso arrived just as the performance ended. In the end, they all went to sing karaoke to celebrate. Aki, feeling jealous when she saw Fujinomiya sitting next to Makabe, decided to participate in the karaoke competition. While everyone sang well, Makabe felt anxious as he hadn't sung before. He tried to find a way to escape, but the two girls noticed and chased after him to taunt him. Fortunately, Aki appeared and said she wanted a fair match. When she returned to the room, Aki was surprised to find that Fujinomiya had chosen a song from her playlist. Aki then took the microphone and decided not to lose to Fujinomiya, so they sang a duet. Finally, it was Makabe's turn to sing. Unexpectedly, Makabe's singing voice was hard to listen to, and it left everyone stunned. However, Makabe was happy because he thought he had burned a fair amount of calories while singing. In the evening, only Makabe and Aki were left, and Aki was still haunted by Makabe's singing voice. She realized that Makabe cared for her and asked, "What can I do to repay you?" Makabe then asked for a kiss, and to his surprise, Aki agreed. However, it turned out to be another playful trick as Aki gave him a sweet potato to eat instead. As Aki left, Yoshino scolded Makabe, saying, "If you had taken the initiative and kissed her back there, it would have been a success." The moment made Makabe regret that he was too foolish. But he didn't give up and was determined to make Aki fall in love with him and then reject her. Sometime later, Makabe entered the 3rd year of high school. While he was still admiring himself, his little sister came in to tease him. It turns out Makabe was preparing for a practical trip to France. So, Loli's mother prepared a breakfast with a lot of greasy food for him. This made Makabe feel nauseous, so he kicked both of them out. At this moment, Makabe realized that this was the perfect time to enact his plan of revenge against Aki. While Aki and Yoshino had finished preparing all their luggage, they finally departed for France. This surprised Makabe, because this country is very beautiful. Everyone was very excited too. But Makabe still saw Aki being pursued by that chubby guy, and he was even mocking him. Suddenly, Makabe noticed everyone kissing each other, and he realized that this was the perfect place to get revenge and make Aki fall in love with him. While the young man was daydreaming, Aki came over to remind him of the promise they made. Suddenly, a girl collided with Makabe. He realized she was French and tried to use Google Translate. However, he was surprised to find out that she also spoke Japanese. Seeing that they were both Japanese, she was delighted. She introduced herself as Muriel. Turns out, Muriel is a hardcore anime and manga fan, so she learned Japanese by herself through anime. Both of them realized that this girl was an otaku. Muriel then showed Makabe a manga she had created herself. Unexpectedly, the plot was terrible, but she recognized Makabe as the ideal high school senior in her story. So, Muriel wanted Makabe to be a model for her. This immediately made Aki jealous, and she reminded Makabe, "You forgot our date, didn't you?" So Makabe had to find a way to decline the girl and tell her that Aki was his girlfriend, which left Muriel disappointed. On Kojiro's side, he was starting to develop feelings for Fujinomiya but hadn't mustered the courage to ask her out yet. Suddenly, they both saw Makabe and Aki running towards them, looking exhausted. As it turned out, when they had just left, they were surrounded by a group of people in black suits who appeared to be members of the mafia. Because Makabe and Aki didn't understand French, they were unsure of what these people wanted. Makabe was fearful, but then they allowed him to talk to their boss. It turns out his name is Frank, and he's Muriel's older brother. Frank scolded Makabe, asking him why he dared to reject Muriel. He insisted that now both Makabe and Aki needed to make Muriel happy again and teach her how to write Japanese romance stories. At this point, Makabe recounted everything to Yoshino, and she praised that the relationship between Makabe and Aki was developing very well. She promised to help him even more. Meanwhile, Gasso realized that Aki was getting closer to Makabe, because he wanted to restore his family's reputation, so he was determined to win Aki's affection. In the morning, Makabe and Aki had to meet Muriel. Makabe started pointing out the inconsistencies in her story since he considered himself an expert in romance novels. However, Muriel had a different perspective on romance, so she wanted to kiss Makabe as an experiment. This made Aki jealous, and she pushed both of them away. She realized that Muriel didn't understand Japanese-style love, so Aki decided to demonstrate it with Makabe for her. But at this moment, Aki is also unsure about what to do. On the other hand, Yoshino had tricked Gasso into going elsewhere so that he wouldn't disrupt Aki and Makabe's meeting. While she was pretending to be innocent, Gasso found out that Yoshino and Makabe were working together. At this point, Gasso has begun to threaten Yoshino because he is Aki's soon-to-be husband. He believes that eventually, he will become her owner, but Yoshino knows well that he is not the little boy Piggy from before. However, she still can't reveal the truth because she holds another secret. While Makabe and Aki are trying to act as if they were a couple for Muriel to observe. But neither of them has ever been in love before, so they also don't know what to do. Suddenly, Makabe notices that his hands are sweaty, and he realizes that Aki is as nervous as he is. Aki then starts feeling hungry, so Makabe rushes to buy food for her, making her happy again. Meanwhile, Muriel is still observing them like a camera following their every move. Suddenly, Makabe had the idea to feed each other. Just like in the stories, this made both of them feel shy and reluctant to continue. Suddenly, a lost dog appeared, and its owner came to apologize and took it away, which reminded Aki of a dog she used to have when she was younger. Makabe also recalled those two dogs. Suddenly, Aki decided to explain to Makabe why she couldn't accept his feelings. It turned out that from a young age, Aki's parents were always arguing, so the only companions she had were those two dogs. Suddenly, Aki saw a chubby boy being bullied, so Aki released the dogs and scared away the bullies. She found out that the chubby boy's name was Masamune, and from that day on, they started to become close friends. This friendship brought joy to Aki's daily life, and they often took photos together. She even helped Masamune get revenge on his bullies, making him feel more at ease. However, Aki suddenly revealed that her parents had just divorced. Masamune tried to comfort her by hugging her, but for some reason, he disappeared from Aki's life after that. Upon learning that Aki actually had a crush on the chubby boy, Masamune, Makabe was surprised. It was clear that Aki had previously driven him away and even insulted him as Piggy. It turned out that Makabe was actually planning to pick some flowers to give to Aki. Unexpectedly, he became the target of retaliation by the bullies. Despite Aki watching from inside the house and seeing what happened, she didn't help him and even insulted him as Piggy, and drove him away. So, from that point on, Makabe started planning his revenge on Aki. At this point, Makabe confronted Aki and asks, "Why did you call me Piggy and chase me away back then?" Seeing the two of them arguing, Muriel quickly intervened to separate them. However, Aki didn't understand what Makabe was talking about and got angry, walking away. Later in the evening, Makabe returned to the hotel, while Aki went to find Yoshino to cry and confide in her. At this point, Makabe's group had finished their internship, and everyone was back at school, while Yoshino was trying to squeeze through the crowd to buy lunch for Aki. Suddenly, Aki called and told Yoshino to buy more rice balls for her. Makabe, on the other hand, was busy doing push-ups to gain muscle. Unexpectedly, he got sprayed by Yoshino to treat body odor. It turned out that Yoshino had come to inform Makabe that Aki was still upset about the previous incident. This left Makabe utterly bewildered, as it was evident that Aki was the one who had lied. Yoshino explained that it might be due to Aki's jumbled memories and promised to help Makabe find a way to comfort her. At this moment, Yoshino coincidentally ran into Gasso. He said, "Sooner or later, I'll become Aki's husband and be your master." Makabe was still dreaming, imagining that Aki had forgiven him, which made him so happy that he fell off his chair. Suddenly, Fujinomiya came to find him. She asks, "Are you free this afternoon? I want you to go with me to a place." It turns out she wants Makabe to go with her to a medical checkup because Fujinomiya's servant requested a day off today. So she immediately took the opportunity to invite Makabe for a walk. At that moment, Makabe told Fujinomiya the story of his relationship with Aki, including his revenge plan to make Aki fall in love with him and then reject her in the worst way. So Fujinomiya immediately ran up to hug Makabe and said, "If you're with Aki just for revenge, then date me." Suddenly, Makabe noticed that a group of men in black was following him, so he immediately grabbed Fujinomiya's hand and ran, leaving her puzzled about why Makabe was running so fast. At this moment, Makabe remembered that those mafia members were Muriel's older brother's subordinates. Surprisingly, both of them were surrounded, leaving Makabe worried and unsure of what to do. Muriel's older brother then appeared, scolding Makabe for leaving Muriel behind and returning to Japan. Thinking he would draw his gun to deal with him, surprisingly, he took out an envelope instead. It turned out to be Muriel's comic that she had tirelessly worked on to complete, thanks to Makabe's help, which significantly improved her drawing skills. The older brother decided to spare Makabe. Fujinomiya became curious about the manga and found that it told the story of Makabe and Aki but with a completely different and happy ending from reality. Inside the manga, Fujinomiya discovered a thank you letter from Muriel. Suddenly, Makabe realized something from the comic that could help him resolve his issues with Aki. While he was studying the comic, Makabe was suddenly kicked down to the ground by his younger sister. She immediately demanded that Makabe return her underwear, because his little sister had seen someone stealing underwear outside the window and thought it was Makabe. However, it turned out to be their mother, who was taking her daughter's clothes to wash. So, the younger sister pretended like nothing had happened. Aki was having lunch with Gasso and her 3 close friends on her side. Gasso was eager to win Aki's affection because his younger sister was still in the hospital and needed money. On one occasion when Gasso attended a party, the family secretary of Aki accidentally mistook Gasso for the chubby boy from the past. Because he learned that the Adagaki family was very wealthy, Gasso returned home to seek the contract left by his grandfather. It turned out that the two families had previously promised to arrange a marriage between them. Therefore, Gasso decided to become Aki's husband to inherit her family's wealth. On Makabe's side, he went to find Yoshino and upon seeing Aki's front yard, it reminded him of his childhood when he used to play there. It turns out Makabe realized that Aki was not the person who had chased him away and given him the nickname, Piggy, because when they were in France, Aki had no knowledge of this nickname. The truth is that Yoshino was the one who gave Makabe the nickname, Piggy. Makabe realized that it had always been Yoshino who called him Piggy. Unable to hide it any longer, Yoshino decided to reveal the truth. On Aki's side, Gasso is still trying to pursue her in order to win her affection ahead of Makabe. It turned out that while they were at the cafe, Gasso and the three girls had come up with a plan to create a rift between Makabe and Aki and prevent him from having any more chances to approach Aki. At that moment, he noticed that Aki wanted to ride the Ferris wheel, so Gasso invited her to join him. On the other hand, Makabe couldn't understand why Yoshino had harmed him in the past. She said, "Because I hated you back then." It turns out that when she was young, Yoshino had a severe cold, but she felt very free because she didn't have to play with Aki anymore. Because Aki always treated Yoshino like a toy, she thought Aki would be very sad during the time she was sick. Surprisingly, she saw Aki happily playing with a chubby boy outside. Yoshino thought that the chubby boy was also being bullied just like her. She didn't expect Aki to be very happy and become close friends with the chubby boy, making Yoshino feel jealous. Suddenly it was Aki's turn to get sick. However, her parents were constantly arguing and didn't pay much attention to Aki. Even though Aki knew her parents were getting a divorce, she didn't feel too sad because she still had the chubby boy by her side, which made Yoshino realize that she had been abandoned by Aki. Suddenly, Yoshino heard the chubby boy's cries for help. Seeing Masamune being bullied by those kids, she disguised herself as Aki. That's when Yoshino chased Masamune away. But since then, Aki started crying more and began to dislike boys. Because Yoshino realized that she was wrong, she searched for the chubby boy everywhere but couldn't find him to make amends for her mistake. One day, Yoshino accidentally realized that Makabe was the chubby boy from the past. That's when Yoshino began to help Makabe to make amends for her mistake. Even though she knew that Makabe was planning to break Aki's heart as soon as he won her affection, but Yoshino was confident that Makabe would never abandon Aki. So Yoshino told Makabe that Aki was out with Gasso, and she said, "I beg you, please help me save Aki." Makabe then ran quickly to find Aki. Meanwhile, Gasso was planning to confess his feelings to Aki but didn't know how to do it, so he tried to make sure Aki had a great time. As Makabe arrived at the park, he encountered these three girls, and they were angry, thinking that he was deceiving Yoshino and Aki. However, Makabe was resolute and accused Gasso of being a liar, so they pointed him in the direction to find Aki. In the end, he finally arrived at the park while Gasso was still trying to win Aki's affection. She learned about Gasso's younger sister being in the hospital, and promised to help him because she still thought Gasso was Masamune. Surprisingly, Makabe appeared and punched Gasso in the face, leaving Aki bewildered about what was happening. However, Makabe, fueled by anger, scolded Aki and said, "Date me." Sudden Gasso also attacked Makabe, mocking him for only being handsome and not understanding the suffering of the ugly. This prompted Makabe to decide to reveal the truth. He confessed that he used to be a fat kid who was constantly bullied by his friends. Later, he ran to the home of an arrogant young lady who saved him. At this moment, Aki realized that Makabe was the chubby boy from their past, and she exclaimed, "You are Masamune, aren't you?" "That's right, it's me." But Gasso still didn't give up, insisting, "I'm the chubby boy." Suddenly, Aki noticed that Gasso had breasts, leaving everyone in shock. They couldn't believe that Gasso was actually a girl. Gasso quickly found an excuse to escape, leaving Aki and Makabe feeling awkward, not knowing how to interact with each other. Makabe teased Aki for spending so much time with Gasso without realizing that Gasso was actually a girl. So Aki teasingly replied, "Wasn't it you who just begged me to date you?" This embarrassed Makabe, and he was surprised when Aki actually agreed to go on a date with him. At the same time, Gasso rushed to the hospital to visit his injured sister, and seeing his sister's injured face made her very worried. But Gasso felt relieved because he no longer had to pretend to be Makabe. While Makabe continued to train hard, he couldn't believe that Aki had agreed to date him. When his little sister called him for dinner, he was so startled that he fell to the ground. But he still couldn't quite recover from the surprise. The next day at school, Makabe was confessed to by this girl. Makabe realized that Christmas was approaching, and these girls were actively seeking boyfriends. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to reject her since he was already with Aki. Surprising, the girl felt so lonely that she was willing to become the second person in a relationship, leaving Makabe feeling helpless and trying to find a way to escape. He thought he was safe, but then he unexpectedly ran into Fujinomiya. So it turned out that she knew about Makabe dating Aki because currently, this news is known to everyone in the school. However, Makabe noticed that Fujinomiya seemed jealous because she had confessed to him in the past. Makabe apologized. But Fujinomiya remained optimistic, believing that she would eventually win Makabe back from Aki. While in class, Makabe started to worry about how the date with Aki would go. Suddenly, he received a text message from Aki asking him to buy lunch for her. Lunchtime. Makabe experienced desperation as he had to squeeze into the crowd to purchase food and was additionally urged by Aki to speed up. So, Makabe courageously squeezed in, only to find out that the person selling food was Gasso, which surprised him. Gasso was working there to earn some extra money. It was then that Gasso revealed that she had pretended to be Makabe mainly to borrow money from Aki's family. She also blamed Makabe for hitting her earlier, but thanks to that, Gasso felt much more comfortable now, as she no longer had to pretend to be Makabe. Suddenly, Gasso demanded that Makabe take responsibility for her, which left the young man shocked and unwilling to comply. In the end, Makabe managed to bring food for Aki, which made her angry because he arrived too late. Suddenly, Aki started forcing Makabe to eat more to make him look like the chubby boy from before, making Makabe feel embarrassed. However, he realized that Aki had never actually hated him. Out of the blue, Makabe rushed towards Aki, making both of them feel awkward. Aki thought he was about to kiss her, but then Yoshino appeared, causing Makabe to blush and run away. At that moment, Makabe realized that the person who had called him Piggy wasn't Aki but Yoshino. So, that afternoon, Makabe arranged to meet Yoshino at the park. While waiting, Yoshino suddenly appeared, startling him. It turned out that Makabe hadn't told Aki about Yoshino's past mistakes. Makabe felt troubled because he didn't know how to approach dating Aki, so he pleaded with Yoshino to help. Yoshino then revealed Aki's birthday was on December 24th, coinciding with Christmas, which made Makabe happy as he could plan a birthday celebration for Aki. However, Yoshino mentioned that they wouldn't be in contact privately anymore, making him wonder why. The next morning, Makabe pretended not to know Aki's birthday, but Aki mentioned it herself. Makabe then proposed to organize a birthday celebration for her. Although she was quite shy, Aki agreed to it. By the evening, Makabe realized he wouldn't have Yoshino's help, so he had to plan the date himself. He asked Shinatsu what she would do if she had a Christmas date, but she fantasized about dating a prince in a castle. Suddenly, Loli Mom arrived. Curious about the situation, Makabe realized that nobody could help him, so he went to his room. He resorted to his last resort and began reading all of his romance novels, but it didn't provide any useful insights. Meanwhile, Aki was choosing her outfit for the date. The next morning, Makabe asked Kojiro if there was any way to help him, so Kojiro directed Makabe to a very nice bakery. Makabe and Aki both started preparing for their date. Finally, Christmas arrived, and Makabe was waiting for Aki. To his surprise, Aki appeared looking very beautiful, thanks to Yoshino who had picked her outfit. They went to watch a movie, and Makabe remembered that the last time they watched a movie, they sat far apart. But this time, Aki chose to sit right next to him. While they were watching the movie, Yoshino was still at home working. Suddenly, her older sister came and gave her a new outfit. After the movie, Aki was in tears. So Makabe suggested that they go for dinner next. However, when they arrived at a bakery, it had burned down. They continued to search for other bakeries, but they were all closed. By the afternoon, Makabe still hadn't found any place to eat. Despite that, he was determined to take Aki out to dinner. Suddenly, Makabe remembered and said, "Why don't you come to my house?" That evening, Makabe took Aki to his home. If Loli Mom and his little sister found out that he had brought a girlfriend home, there would be a lot of commotion. However, Aki didn't mind. But when they arrived home, they didn't find anyone there. It turned out that both of Makabe's family members had gone to a hot spring, so there was no one at home. This meant that Makabe and Aki were alone together. In France, Muriel was having dinner with her older brother, and seeing her sister happier than before made her brother very happy. She even gave him a painting she had drawn, inviting him to visit Japan with her. While Aki and Makabe were feeling awkward being alone together at home, Aki tried to act calm and asked Makabe to make tea for her. However, Makabe didn't know where to find tea since his home was filled with sweets. So, Aki decided to help Makabe. The two of them started cooking together in the kitchen. Even though neither of them was good at cooking, in the end, they both managed to make a cake each. Suddenly, Makabe wanted to feed a piece of his cake to Aki, which made her a bit shy. But Aki didn't want to be teased by Makabe, so she ate the cake. When she noticed that Makabe's cake was too plain, she poured extra sugar on it. which annoyed Makabe. He then led Aki to his room. Inside his room, Aki noticed that it was filled with gym equipment and childhood photos of them. Makabe wanted to tell Aki that he didn't want to go back to being a chubby kid. Suddenly, both of them stumbled and fell, causing them to blush. Makabe quickly rushed into the bathroom to hide. While Aki was feeling frustrated and wondering what this fool was up to, Makabe sent a message to Aki. Makabe texted Aki asking her to retrieve the birthday gift in his jacket pocket and told Aki to return home first. It turns out Makabe realized he might be suffering from a strange illness and was afraid of passing it on to Aki. Aki returned home and Yoshino asks if the date went well. But Aki couldn't express her feelings as she had unintentionally stumbled upon Makabe's revenge diary. The next morning, Makabe immediately went to see a doctor. But the doctor said he only had normal hives, a result of excessive stress he was currently under. On his way home, Makabe thought about Aki, believing that she was currently the source of his stress. Meanwhile, Futaba and Kojiro were discussing their New Year's plans when they spotted Makabe and invited him to join them. On Aki's side, she was still pondering Makabe's strange behavior and his revenge diary. Even Yoshino found Aki's behavior very peculiar. Makabe agreed to the New Year's plan with Futaba and Kojiro. But when they wanted to invite Aki along, he quickly found a reason to avoid it. So, they decided to invite Fujinomiya instead. While Fujinomiya was looking through childhood photos taken with Makabe, it turned out that Makabe's lowly mother had introduced her to him when they were kids. Seeing that she was quite shy, Makabe gave her a chicken drumstick. Suddenly, Fujinomiya received a text inviting her to the New Year's outing. The next day, they all gathered again. Fujinomiya wondered where Aki was. They started by visiting a shrine for good luck. After that, they went to have some milk tea. Next, they played badminton together. Surprisingly, Fujinomiya turned out to be really good at badminton. As a result, Kojiro ended up losing and had drawings on his face. In the end, everyone's faces were all drawn on. Makabe was delighted to see Fujinomiya's face painted. In the evening, as they were heading home, Makabe noticed that he no longer had hives on his hands. Finally, Makabe went back to school. Since Christmas night, he had not met Aki again. Suddenly, he saw Yoshino, but she was acting cold towards him, leaving Makabe bewildered. When he left, he coincidentally bumped into Fujinomiya at the hospital, making her worried, thinking that Makabe might be sick. So, Fujinomiya invited Makabe to her home. Unexpectedly, Fujinomiya's housekeeper appeared to be quite cautious around Makabe. She was afraid that Makabe might hurt her mistress' feelings once again. At this point, Fujinomiya asked Makabe what was wrong with him. So he explained to her that whenever he felt pressured, he would break out in hives. Fujinomiya realized that Makabe's condition was burnout syndrome. And the reason he was under pressure was due to being haunted by the past, not really liking Aki. This surprised Makabe. Fujinomiya recounted the story from their childhood to Makabe, but he couldn't remember anything. If he answered incorrectly, he would be beaten by Fujinomiya's housekeeper. At this point, Fujinomiya asks, "Do you remember the time you rejected my confession in this house before?" Makabe realized that she had never given up, which surprised him. When Fujinomiya was about to kiss Makabe, she was immediately stopped by the housekeeper, who believed that Makabe was trying to seduce her mistress. It turns out that Fujinomiya was just testing Makabe to see if he still gets hives. However, Fujinomiya realizes that Makabe is also under pressure when he's around her. On their way home, Makabe received a text message from Aki, and he is torn about whether to continue with Aki. Then he notices Yoshino has fallen, so he rushes to help her. Meanwhile, Aki is hungry and waits for Yoshino to bring her food. When Yoshino sees Makabe, she tries to run away, but her injured leg makes it difficult, so Makabe picks her up. Unexpectedly, she punched him right in the face. It turned out to be her self-defense technique when dealing with potential harassers. Even though she didn't want to accept Makabe's help, in the end, Yoshino had to ask Makabe to carry her back. As for Aki's three crazy fangirl friends, they couldn't accept the fact that Aki was dating Makabe. They believed that Aki had been deceived by Makabe, which left them feeling quite sad. Suddenly, Aki arrived, making them all feel awkward and unsure of how to approach her. On Makabe's side, he was carrying Yoshino home, and he noticed everyone looking at him, causing him to blush. Yoshino, on the other hand, thought it was because she was too heavy. She suggested that Makabe take her to a nearby park to rest for a while. It turns out that she was wearing a skirt, so her underwear would be exposed if Makabe continued to carry her like that. So, Makabe gave his all to run to the park. Meanwhile, Aki was still enjoying pastries with her three best friends. but they couldn't figure out how to ask her about her relationship with Makabe, making Aki feel that they were very strange. The lowly friend couldn't bear the tension and asks, "Are you dating Makabe?" This question left Aki blushing, and they all realized that it was indeed true. On Makabe's side, he had taken Yoshino to the park. Although her leg was hurting, she didn't allow Makabe to touch her. When he didn't know how to start a conversation, Yoshino asks if he had indeed sent Aki away on her birthday, making Makabe flustered and search for all possible explanations. However, Yoshino pinched his cheek, insisting that he shouldn't treat Aki that way ever again. Suddenly, Makabe felt something very strange when he touched Yoshino, so he decided to try hugging Yoshino, which left her frozen for a few seconds. At that moment, Makabe realized that when he touched Yoshino, he didn't break out in hives anymore, and he felt happier when he was close to her. Unexpectedly, Makabe ended up bumping heads with her and fainting. On Aki's way home, she suddenly encountered Gasso again. At this point, Makabe had recovered but didn't see Yoshino around. She also left a message for Makabe, telling him to pretend like nothing happened, making him even more uncertain about whether to choose Aki or Yoshino. Gasso invited Aki to a cafe to apologize for what she had done. Aki was aware of Gassu's circumstances and no longer blamed her. Aki admired Gasso for truly loving her sister, while Aki was still conflicted about Makabe's revenge diary. Gasso advised Aki not to deceive her own heart and encouraged her to confront her true feelings. This conversation made Aki feel more comfortable. When she returned home, Aki saw Yoshino preparing to bandage her wound. So, Aki told her, "Let me help you bandage it." But when Yoshino took off her shoe, Aki noticed a large bruise on her foot, which made her wonder what had motivated Yoshino to walk home in such pain. So, Aki helped her bandage it. Seeing Aki's concern only intensified Yoshino's self-blame, as she was aware of Makabe's feelings for her. The day after, when Makabe went to school, he saw Yoshino running towards him and hugging him. This startled Makabe as he realized it was all a dream. The following day, Makabe couldn't stop thinking about that dream and began to wonder if he had genuine feelings for Yoshino. When he arrived in class, he saw that his female classmates were already choosing different types of chocolate. So, Makabe realized that Valentine's Day was approaching. Kojiro was contemplating how he seemed more manly because he was getting attention from many female students. Meanwhile, Futaba was determined to give Makabe some chocolate, but she suddenly remembered that Aki would also be giving him a gift. On Aki's side, she was also exploring the flavors of various chocolates. Yoshino realized that Aki was preparing for Valentine's Day, so she suggested to Aki that she should make chocolate for Makabe herself to make him happier. Aki took the advice and started in the kitchen, but she was quite clumsy. Meanwhile, Makabe was still exercising when his little sister suddenly came in and asked him to try the chocolate she had made. However, Makabe refused to eat it because just one piece would be equivalent to hundreds of his push-ups. At this point, Aki succeeded in making a batch of cookies as she couldn't make chocolates. Aki asked Yoshino, "Do you make chocolates to give to someone?" That confused Yoshino. Finally, Valentine's Day arrived, making these guys very happy as they all received chocolates from Futaba. Meanwhile, Kojiro was worrying about how to give chocolates to Fujinomiya. He mustered up the courage and rushed to give her a gift. Seeing her accept his present left Kojiro in a state of confusion. Suddenly, Aki also arrived. Fujinomiya immediately said, "You're probably preparing to give something to Makabe too, right?" This made Aki feel embarrassed, but both of them didn't forget to tease each other. Makabe, on the other hand, was overwhelmed with gifts from several other girls and didn't know what to do with all of them. He received a message from Aki asking him to come to the storage room, so Makabe quickly ran to the storage room. Seeing that he had many gifts made Aki feel jealous, and she no longer wanted to give him a gift. So Makabe tried to plead, and Aki forgave him. Makabe then realized that Aki had put a lot of effort into making cookies for him, so he didn't mind if they were a bit on the chubby side. The next day, they had plans to go out, but Makabe was late as usual. Aki had grown used to this and forgave him, so they went out for a meal together and had a great time. Back at home, Makabe's little sister and the lowly mom discussed his new girlfriend and noticed that since he got a girlfriend, he's been eating more. While Makabe was feeling uncomfortable, because he ate too much today, so he immediately thought of exercising to digest it. However, it ended up making him vomit. This unexpected action made Aki like Makabe even more because she realized he was changing for her. The following day, Fujinomiya coincidentally saw Yoshino eating alone. It turned out that Aki was with Makabe, so she didn't want to disturb them. Meanwhile, Makabe discovered a great pastry shop and invited Aki to visit it together. At this moment, Fujinomiya approached Makabe. She asked Makabe, "Do you still have hives?" But Makabe concealed all of that, not wanting Aki to know. Unexpectedly, when school ended, Fujinomiya arranged to meet Aki and suddenly asked Aki to break up with Makabe, leaving Aki feeling uncomfortable. Because Aki also realized that Makabe doesn't love her, he's just bound by the past. But Fujinomiya was wondering why Aki was still dating Makabe. Aki said, "Because I like him," even though she had seen Makabe's revenge diary. But this time, Aki was determined not to let go of him, as she had changed a lot thanks to Makabe. As Aki left, Fujinomiya noticed that Kojiro had heard everything. At this moment, Yoshino was still waiting for Aki outside. Suddenly, she noticed that Aki seemed very upset. When she found out that Fujinomiya told Aki to break up with Makabe, Yoshino got frustrated and wanted to find Fujinomiya. However, Aki stopped her because she knew that Makabe didn't love her. Suddenly, Yoshino felt guilty about Aki, so she decided to tell Aki the whole truth. Upon learning everything, Aki made a decision. Meanwhile, Makabe and his sister were playing in the snow and building a snowman. When Makabe took a photo to send to Aki, his sister teased him, asking him to introduce his girlfriend soon. With Valentine's Day approaching, the girls were excited and curious about who would give them gifts. Makabe and Aki were having lunch together. Makabe intended to suggest that Aki come to his house to hang out, but he was hesitant about what to say. After school, Kojiro immediately found Fujinomiya to go home together, thinking that Fujinomiya might still be upset about advising Aki to break up with Makabe. However, she told him that she had no regrets about advising Aki to break up. In the evening, while studying, Aki called Makabe and invited him for a date on the upcoming weekend. Makabe suddenly remembered that this weekend was White Day. This left Makabe stunned since he hadn't prepared anything. So, he immediately went to ask his little sister what he should give Aki. Loli Mom suggested that he bake a cake for his girlfriend. However, when he entered the kitchen and started baking, all his cakes ended up burnt and black. Despite the initial failure, Makabe didn't give up. The next morning, Kojiro noticed how stressed Makabe was about choosing a gift for Aki, so they decided to go to a bakery together after school. Unexpectedly, Makabe saw a bunny-shaped cake that resembled Aki, and he decided to choose it. When they left the bakery, Makabe was surprised to find out that Kojiro had also bought a cake, intending to give it to Fujinomiya. The next morning, Aki was all set for her date with Makabe. However, Makabe was puzzled about why Aki had chosen to meet him at a pharmacy. It turns out Aki wanted to take Makabe to meet his old friends. Upon seeing Aki, the guy wearing glasses immediately got frightened. Aki asks, "Do you recognize him?" Upon learning that Makabe was the chubby boy they had bullied before, it surprised him to see how much Makabe had changed, and he also apologized to Makabe for bullying him when they were kids. In the evening, on their way home, Aki realized that Makabe had become much stronger. Just as she praised him, Makabe started crying because he was deeply moved by what Aki had done for him. So, Makabe took out a gift to give to Aki, making her very happy. Suddenly, Aki returned the gift to Makabe and said they should break up, leaving him in shock. In the following days, Makabe didn't go to school, causing great concern among his friends who didn't know what had happened. When they saw Aki passing by, they ran up to ask and found out that the two had indeed broken up. Even Yoshino was surprised by this, leaving Yoshino puzzled about why Aki had acted that way. But this time, Aki was determined and left. Yoshino thought there might be some misunderstanding, so they decided to pay a visit to Makabe's house. That afternoon, the whole group went to Makabe's house and were surprised to find that Makabe's family was quite wealthy. They met Makabe's younger sister, but they noticed that the house was in disarray. It turned out that Makabe had left home after that incident, leaving his mother crying in his room. His sister informed them that Makabe had gone to the mountains where he used to train. Since they couldn't locate Makabe, the group had no choice but to return home. Suddenly, Yoshino blamed Fujinomiya for causing this situation by separating Aki and Makabe's feelings. So, Yoshino was struck by Fujinomiya because she didn't act like that. Suddenly, Aki arrived and decided to explain to Yoshino. While Makabe was up on the mountain cleaning, he didn't know what to do and even ended up burning the gift he had prepared for Aki. At that moment, Aki was confiding in Yoshino. Aki suggested that they let go of their roles as master and servant and talk as equals because they had been together since they were kids and shared many memories. At this moment, Aki also realized that Yoshino had feelings for Makabe. Yoshino realized that she couldn't continue to lie any longer. So, Yoshino had to admit it to Aki. It turns out that she had liked Makabe since the days they planned together. So Aki immediately ordered Yoshino to find Makabe and express her true feelings. While Yoshino was running to catch the last subway train, she remembered many moments with Makabe. In the morning, Makabe was arranging firewood when he remembered his past. While he was preparing to go for a run, he suddenly saw Yoshino. She immediately ran to hug Makabe, even kissed him. In the following days, Yoshino was about to leave when she ran into Aki. Aki asks, "You're going on a date, aren't you?" Which made Yoshino embarrassed, and she hurried away. When Yoshino left, Aki started feeling hungry because there was no one at home to cook for her. So, Aki began learning to cook and prepare her own meals. Finally, the new school year began. Futaba was excited to know that she would be in the same class as Fujinomiya and Kojiro. Surprisingly, Gasso was also in their class. Fujinomiya was delighted to be in the same class as Yoshino this year. Suddenly, they discovered that Aki and Makabe were also in the same class, which left Aki in shock. While Aki was feeling confused, Makabe was very enthusiastic because this was the first year they would be in the same class. At this point, Makabe continued to act very naturally in front of Aki, which left her wondering how he could be so relaxed. At lunchtime, Aki went to the storage room to have her lunch by herself. Suddenly, Makabe showed up and brought her some food. Aki didn't understand what Makabe was trying to do, so Yoshino quickly ran over to drag Makabe away to another place, because she didn't understand what was going on. Aki continued to eat. In the evening, when Yoshino returned home, she was shocked to see that Aki had cut off her long hair. Aki explained, "I just wanted to change my style." Suddenly, Yoshino got angry and called Aki a fool, and said, "We were just teasing you." Unexpectedly, she threw Aki out and told her to go see Makabe. At that moment, Aki went to the school to meet Makabe. Suddenly, she noticed a letter, and Aki realized that Makabe might be seeking revenge on her just like before. So, Aki ran off to find Makabe. She realized they were all places with memories of both of them. Suddenly, Aki spotted Makabe and wanted to run down to scold him. After a while of playing chase, Makabe finally caught Aki. At this point, Aki thought that Makabe was dating Yoshino, but Makabe didn't understand and began to recount what had happened that day to Aki. It turned out that on that evening, Yoshino had confessed her feelings to Makabe. But this time, Makabe had decided to choose Aki. So, Makabe and Yoshino were not dating each other. At this point, Aki had just read the letter from Makabe, saying, "Let's date," which came as a surprise to her because he had turned down Yoshino, and Aki also understood the feelings that Makabe had for her. Suddenly, Aki asks, "Can you kiss me?" which made Makabe very shy, but in the end, he mustered up the courage and kissed Aki. At this moment, the prom night had arrived. Everyone remembered the previous year when Aki and Makabe were still playing the roles of Snow White and the Prince. As for Fujinomiya, she teased Yoshino for getting rejected by Makabe. Meanwhile, Aki and Makabe were preparing to dance together.